This is CGTN, China Global Television Network. Live from London, this is The World Today.
Hello, I'm Jamie Owen. Welcome to the programme. Our top stories: Southern Europe scorched as the continent swelters on the brink of new record high temperatures. Our other headlines: pomp, ceremony and controversy, pensions and human rights on the minds of the French as India's Prime Minister is guest of honour for Bastille Day. And where no mission has gone before, India launches its lunar probe to explore the south pole of the moon. Well, the three-headed dog from the gates of hell is here and scorching its way across southern Europe. The Cerberus heatwave, so named from Greek mythology, could be about to set a new temperature record for Europe if it passes 48.8 degrees Celsius in Italy. The rest of the region is sweltering as well, with the mercury expected to hover around 40 degrees in parts of Spain, France, Turkey and Greece, which is where we're going to head now, and our correspondent Evangelo Sipsas in Athens. How hot is it there, and how does it feel, more to the point?
Well, it is very high, I can tell you that for sure. And speaking about Greek mythology, I wish I was on Mount Olympus as we speak, because the temperatures up there are much cooler than what they are here. We're standing in front of the Parthenon, the iconic here in Athens monument, and the temperature right now is between 42 and 43 degrees Celsius, and that is in the shade. So you guys can't really see it right now, but I'm sweating quite a lot, and I'm used to this weather. So it is a really warm one today. And today, Friday, and tomorrow, Saturday, the temperature is going to be even higher than what it is today. It might even climb into the mid-40s. So we're talking about a heat wave that is going to be going on for at least a week, as it started on Wednesday, and it will continue until next Wednesday. Now, the temperature won't be as high as it is today and tomorrow, but it's still going to remain in the high 30s and perhaps in the 40s as well. Well, the people here, there's a number of tourists behind me that came here to the Parthenon, as it just opened for the public right now after the government has shut it down for many hours. We went around, we spoke to some of those tourists and how they're coping with the weather, and what are those tips they can give us perhaps to stay cool in this kind of temperature, and this is what they had to tell us.
It is really hot. The minute you step out of anything air conditioned, it's like, so yeah, it is hot.
Here we've been catching taxis everywhere to help, and when you go on Google Maps and you put your trip as walking, comes up with like a weather warning saying we don't recommend you to walk.
Definitely drink lots of water, sunscreen, hat, scarf around the neck, walk in the shade.
And that's pretty much what also the government is saying. Drink as much water as you can, stay in the shade, and avoid being outdoors.
And realistically, what else can they do or say?
Well, besides that, they have shut down most of the monuments. As I mentioned earlier, the Parthenon and any other museums that are outdoor museums, they're going to remain shut from 12 local time until 5, the peak of the heat during the day. There are cooling centers across the city of Athens and other areas as well. For those who cannot afford to use an air conditioner or don't have an air conditioner, they can go there for a few hours and perhaps cool down a little bit. The city of Athens, the municipality, is handing out water to those who are in areas like where we are right now. But also the fire brigade, along with the civil protection, is on standby in case if anything happens, because a number of people, especially those that are over the age of 60, might be suffer from a heat stroke, or those who perhaps have any breathing problems also might suffer from this kind of weather. So everybody is on standby as well. It is high possibility of fires, so also the fire brigade is on standby in case something happens. So until at least next Wednesday, everything is going to be in place to provide citizens and anybody that is in need with the necessities to cope through this heat wave.
Evangelo, thank you for that. Our correspondent Evangelo Sipsas in Athens. Well, Italy is bracing itself for these record-breaking temperatures as the Cerberus heatwave continues to push the mercury above 40 degrees across southern Europe. Our correspondent Giles Gibson is in Rome.
When the temperature rises to dangerous levels, Rome's Civil Protection Agency is ready for action. At this command centre in the heart of the Italian capital, officers are closely monitoring every change in the weather, looking for any sign of a wildfire breaking out.
Abbiamo repentini cambiamenti climatici, passeremo da...
We have sudden changes in the weather. We go from waves of extreme heat to intense rainfall. Citizens need to understand that the world is changing much more rapidly. Institutions can go after the problem and search for the best way to facilitate change and protect people better.
E per poter mettere sempre più in protezione le persone.
For thousands of tourists at Rome's iconic sites, the heat threatens to make their days strolling around the Eternal City feel endless. Several tourists have collapsed while out sightseeing, which is why local authorities are urging visitors to download a special app that tells you where to find water. For Romans used to hot summers, there are some tricks of the trade.
You can find these water fountains, or nasoni, which the city authorities started installing in the 1870s all over Rome. The water is clean and cool, and you'll often see locals stopping to take a drink or even just to splash a bit of water on their face.
This extreme heat has been triggered by an area of high pressure named Cerberus, a three-headed dog that guards hell in Dante's Inferno.
Abbiamo un'alta pressione stabile e un'alta pressione che si propaga dal...
We have an area of stable high pressure which has spread from Africa towards Europe. This brought last year the hottest summer ever recorded in Europe, and this year we're very close to surpassing that record again. The problem is that with climate change, we're exceeding record after record.
E noi stiamo superando un record dopo l'altro.
Even with slightly cooler summers in the past, the city traditionally empties out in July and August, with those who can afford it fleeing the city for the beach or the mountains. For those who can't, it's simply a game of hide and seek, hiding from the sun and seeking out air conditioning or even just a scrap of shade. Giles Gibson for CGTN, Rome.
Well, heat naturally poses a health risk. Ireland Kelman is Professor of Disasters and Health at University College London. Professor, for those of us who are not distinguished experts like you, I mean, what are, in simple terms, the key effects that extreme heat has on the human body?
At these horrific temperatures, basically our body can no longer maintain our temperature. So we overheat, which shuts down our organs, and we also dehydrate, which shuts down our organs. Other problems can be the worsening air pollution or smoke from wildfires, so people with breathing difficulties like asthma have trouble. And then very sadly, a lot of people will say, well, I have to cool off, I need to go into the river or the sea. And we do see a lot of drownings from people not taking precautions, just trying to cool off.
And who is most at risk? Is it the young, the old, or pretty much everyone?
Well, we are all at risk and we all have to take precautions. What we see is that people who are old, children, and those who have long-term pre-existing health conditions are particularly at risk. Certainly babies have to be watched because they have a lot of skin, a lot of area, but not a lot of mass, and they can't really tell us I'm feeling hot. Many old people will live alone and not even be aware that they are overheating or in trouble. So we must always look on elderly people within our networks, particularly those who live alone.
So what are the quick fixes? I mean, how do you go about mitigating the risks if you simply can't leave these areas?
We definitely have to drink a lot of water, and we heard that from Italy and Greece. Avoid alcohol, avoid coffee, drink lots and lots of water, and really it's just about staying cool. With this length of heat wave, when it does not cool down at night, our bodies cannot adjust. And so it's wonderful to hear that Athens is opening cooling centers. We need more of those. But not everyone has that opportunity. If they miss work, they lose income, they don't eat, or they get fired. So really try and find some way to stay cool, stay out of the sun, drink lots and lots of water, and just be aware of how you're feeling, and definitely check on people around you to ensure that they are okay and not too hot.
I mean, communities in the Middle East and India and Africa are perhaps more familiar with these kind of temperatures. How well equipped, or perhaps how well prepared, would you say, are southern European countries in terms of their infrastructure to withstand these kind of temperatures?
Southern Europe knows about heat. They do get it, and we've heard that wonderful measures that Greece is taking as well as Italy. The problem is now the extent of the heat waves and also the temperatures, which if they don't break records this year, they will eventually. So it is very hard to tell people stay at home or stay in cooling centers for several days in a row. It's very hard to tell agricultural workers to not go to work, and then that will have knock-on effects on our food supplies. So ultimately, no matter how hot it has been in the past, and Southern Europe has dealt with it and has been well prepared, we've a long way to go to be ready for the terrible temperatures that we are expecting in the future.
Really? I mean, this isn't a one-off. You think we should really get ready for more of this on a regular basis?
Unfortunately, this is going to be the norm rather than the extreme. We are going to have to look at our transportation networks because railway lines buckle in the heat, roads can become unsafe. If too many people use air conditioning, that's going to lead to power outages, and then none of us can stay cool. And at these temperatures, above 40 degrees Celsius with humidity, turning on a fan can actually dehydrate us faster because it simply blows hot, humid air onto us. So unfortunately, our cities are not ready for it, our employment structure is not ready for it, and our bodies simply cannot cope with these temperatures for an extended period.
Professor, good to see you. Thank you for your time and your expertise. Ilan Kelman, Professor of Disasters and Health at University College, London. Monsoon rain is continuing to lash northern India, causing death and destruction. The Yamuna River has surged to record high levels with flash flooding, prompting mass evacuations. More than 100 people have died in the last fortnight. Transport is heavily disrupted in the capital, Delhi, with some urban areas underwater. Almost 1,000 workers at London's Gatwick Airport will strike over pay for 8 days in July and August, threatening travel misery for thousands of holidaymakers. Gatwick is the UK's second busiest airport and a major hub for flights to Europe and some intercontinental routes. The US film and television industry has effectively shut down after American actors walked out on strike, joining writers on the picket line. This is the first dual industrial action in 63 years. Performers are angry over levels of pay for streamed content and worried about the use of artificial intelligence in the industry. One person has been injured in overnight drone strikes on Ukraine. The attacks happened in the central Dnipro region around the city of Kryvyi Rih. Ukraine claims most Iranian drones are now being intercepted before they hit their targets. Fighting has also continued on the ground around Bakhmut and in the region of Soledar. Meanwhile, Russia claims the use of United States and NATO satellites in Ukraine is heightening the risk of a direct armed clash with Moscow. Russia's Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov, says their continued supply could mean catastrophic consequences for Ukraine's allies. The Black Sea grain export deal meant to avert a global food crisis may collapse within days. This allows Ukraine to safely export grain from major ports despite the current war. But Russia is threatening to withdraw from the agreement, as our correspondent Stephanie Freed now explains.
Igor has taken a hit on profits from the 120 hectares of wheat, barley and sunflower crops he farms.
I've lost 70% of my income since the start of the full-scale invasion.
His plight is an accurate representation of Ukraine's agriculture industry.
We are losing millions. The farmers of Ukraine are losing millions of dollars.
The UN and Turkey brokered the Black Sea Initiative last July, stipulating Russia's consent to free movement of Ukraine's grain export vessels. But the ongoing conflict, mined and shelled fields, and crops devastated by the disastrous Kakhovka Dam explosion are impacting exports. At the same time, the limited number of ports specified in the deal means expensive overland shipping costs for farmers and exporters.
It was very expensive, and it was both uncomfortable for buyers and sellers, and it led to huge losses to Ukrainian farmers.
Days before the initiative is set to expire, the Kremlin is signaling reluctance to renew the deal.
Maybe like 20–25%, that the deal will be prolonged in a way it works now.
Nibelon exporters say moving goods via the Danube River is an option, but it's a slower, more expensive alternative. Ukraine is the world's top sunflower oil producer and one of the world's top 4 grain exporters. Failure to renew the Black Sea deal will cause global food prices to rise and further endanger countries on the brink of starvation, namely Sudan, Afghanistan, and Somalia. Stephanie Fried, CGTN, Kyiv, Ukraine.
Well, President Vladimir Putin says he offered Wagner soldiers the chance to continue fighting in Ukraine under a new commander following the recent failed mutiny. Putin told a leading Russian newspaper the offer was made to the Wagner fighters at a meeting also attended by Yevgeny Prigozhin, the mercenary group's chief. Let's talk to our correspondent, Dasha Chernyshova in Moscow. Dasha, Putin has also said Wagner no longer exists as a legal entity. What more do we know about the group's organisation and activities now?
Well, indeed, as we have heard from the Russian President Vladimir Putin, a very rare and strong admission that Wagner Group does not exist legally. So he said the group is still there, but legally there is no such entity as the Wagner Group, because under the Russian law there could be no private military organizations in the country. And the Russian president has hinted that the Russian authorities are indeed to work on this matter. He said that was a complex matter subject to discussions at the Russian State Duma and within the Russian government. So we understand the authorities will be starting doing that. But in that meeting, according to the Russian president, he also said that the group could continue to fight for their motherland. As we have heard before, the Kremlin suggesting that the fighters have pledged their loyalty to the Russian president. So we understand they were offered several employment options to continue fighting, particularly under their commander and as a unit as they were. Now, interestingly, that statement raises many questions in Russia, as the Russian president has previously been saying that the group has received funding from the Russian state, $1 billion over the course of the 1 year since May 2022 to May 2023. So that raises indeed many questions. As to the Wagner Group at the moment, we have heard from the Belarusian authorities saying that the Wagner Group is now helping train the Belarusian soldiers. And indeed, that is just in the correspondence with the statement we have heard before from Belarus and Alexander Lukashenko, suggesting that Wagner Group could be very useful in sharing the first-hand combat experience with the Belarusian army.
Sources in the United Nations warning that the Black Sea grain deal might collapse when it comes up for renewal next week. What more do we know about that?
Well, certainly the indication from Moscow is very strong that Moscow is not seeing any grounds for further extension of the arrangement, which Moscow says is not working. Now, the Russian position here is very clear. Moscow hasn't seen any progress being made on the implementation of the deal regarding the facilitation of the Russian agricultural exports to the international markets. There are many problems: the freight, the insurances, this reconnection to the SWIFT system, without which the payments are incredibly difficult. So Russia insists that zero progress has been made on that part of the deal, while the part of the deal which relates to the Ukrainian exports of grain has become the commercial one, as the Russian authorities have pointed out. So the most recent statements from the Russian president indicate that Russia will withdraw from this deal, but at the same time we also understand that Moscow could resume the negotiations on this deal and could resume its participation in this arrangement should at least one of the conditions that Russia has introduced be finally implemented. But at the moment, Moscow says no grounds are seen to extend the deal any further.
Dasha, thank you for that. Our correspondent Dasha Chernyshova in Moscow. You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, President Macron hosts Narendra Modi at France's Bastille Day parade. Campaigners are unhappy at his choice of Indian guest of honour.
Roger, Ricky, last clear.
We can try out the wild and crazy ideas.
Nothing can stop an idea whose time has come, and this idea is coming.
I actually feel quite comfortable in isolation.
We should all be very basic when we're trying to save the world.
We hope it will happen. We have to live in hope.
Facing the unknown is always difficult. In a world in turmoil, it's easy to lose orientation. But when the storms come, we have to see the possibilities, reinvent, find new opportunities, discover a path forward. CGTN. See the difference.
This week on Razor, creating the power of the sun here on Earth.
We will have endless energy. Could replace the oil. It will for sure change our life, change the world a lot. We are working on this project. It's like when humans learn how to use fire. This is the second fire of the human in our history.
Hello, welcome back. A reminder of our top stories. Southern Europe is scorched as the continent swelters on the brink of new record high temperatures. Well, it wasn't a totally smooth ride for Emmanuel Macron at the Bastille Day celebrations in Paris. He was booed by some members of the public as he drove down the Champs-Élysées amid continuing anger over his pension reforms. And human rights campaigners have criticised his decision to invite India's Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, as his guest of honour. Well, let's talk to our correspondent, Alex Cadier, in Paris. Alex, why has Prime Minister Modi been chosen as guest of honour in Paris?
Well, Jamie, if you believe the American banking group Goldman Sachs, India will be the second biggest economy in 2075. That might be one of the reasons behind this guest of honour status given to Prime Minister Modi, really rolling out the red carpet here in Paris for the Indian Prime Minister. He was gifted a replica chess set by the French president, a Charlemagne chess set that dates back to the 11th century. So all the kind of trimmings that Paris can offer were on display for the Indian Prime Minister. He was also given the Grande Croix de la Légion d'honneur, the highest honour bestowed upon a foreign dignitary that France can give. Only 60 or so people living today have that honour. So really the red carpet being rolled out because France wants to build its partnership with India, wants to have more trade ties with India. They see India as a more reliable partner in the region and certainly a more like-minded partner than others in the region in Asia, particularly with that economic growth, working together on tech, working together on defense. We've heard the Indian government in the last couple of days announcing they would buy 26 Rafale fighter jets from the French and 3 French-designed submarines. So those partnerships really at the core, but it isn't just a relationship between the two leaders. We saw a regiment of the Punjab regiment, Indian soldiers parading down the Champs-Élysées alongside their French military counterparts, leading that procession, and President Macron noting and remembering that Indian soldiers fought alongside French ones in World War I. So a lot of symbolism, a lot of pomp, a lot of ceremony, but certainly a desire from the French to build on that relationship.
This has been a rather turbulent time for President Macron, hasn't it? I mean, can you give us a sense of how that plays out among those crowds lining the route?
Well, we were here when the procession went through. We were just looking at the Champs-Élysées when President Macron on the presidential car, the traditional presidential car, drove past. And I'll be honest with you, Jamie, some people booed, some people cheered. Now, the French are not shy about expressing their discontent. They're not shy about expressing their discontent directly to their president when he's in earshot. So certainly that was what we heard. There was a mixed reaction to his appearance. That's something you would expect. It has been a few turbulent weeks in France. We've seen demonstrations. We've seen pockets of rioting across the country, both in the last few months about the pension reform, but also after the police gunned down a teenager just a few weeks ago outside of Paris. So a mixed reaction for the French president, but certainly he seemed undeterred, and the French very vocal, as you would expect, with their disagreements and their discontent, Jamie.
Alex, thank you for that. Our correspondent Alex Cadier in Paris. A mission to land on the moon's south pole has been successfully launched by India.
3, 2, 1, 0.
It's the first attempt by any country to explore that part of the lunar surface. The unmanned rocket is carrying a lander, a rover, and other research equipment, with the lander expected to touch down in August. A previous attempt by India failed in 2019 when the lander crashed. Meanwhile, Japan has suffered a setback to its space ambitions. A new rocket engine exploded during testing, blowing off the roof of the test facility. No one was injured in this accident. The new engine is designed for the next generation of Japan's Epsilon rocket, aimed at boosting the country's competitiveness in the global satellite launch market. The headlines again. Southern Europe is scorched as the continent swelters on the brink of new record high temperatures. Our other headlines: pomp, ceremony and controversy, pensions and human rights on the minds of the French as India's Prime Minister is guest of honour for Bastille Day. And that is The World Today. Thank you for watching. There's more news on CGTN Europe's channel on the Telegram app, or scan the QR code on the screen to get stories and updates sent direct to your phone. We're back with more news at the top of this hour. Coming up next is World Insight. For now, from all of the team in London, it's goodbye.
Hello and welcome to weather forecast over to Europe. Under influence of upper level low trough, we'll have persistent rain from much of western all the way to northern portion over this weekend. As you can see on Saturday, we're going to have light to moderate rainfall in much of western portion, France, all the way up to northern Europe and stretching down to western Russia and eastern Ukraine. As we get into Sunday, you can see the wet weather conditions will push eastward a little bit. At the same time, down to the south, under influence of ridge of high, we will continue to have clear and sunny sky. Well, temperature-wise, you can see the temperatures be warming up, especially in central portion first, and getting to Sunday, the upper level low trough will usher in some cooler air, so daily high speed sliding significantly, especially for folks in France and Germany. And our business and travel outlook on Sunday, we will have 23 for daily highs in Copenhagen, light rain turning to partly sunny sky, mid-20s, a chance of light rain in Stockholm and Helsinki, see 26 to 16 in Minsk, and down to Kiev, shine of 30, clear sky. And back to Western Europe, you will have 21 light rainfall in London, 26 partly sunny sky in the city of Paris. Well, that's it for now. Stay tuned for more city forecast.